First reading is from Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 to 4, and then 26 to 27. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind of God swept over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good. Then God said, "Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth." So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. I've been thinking about this for a bit, and I want to say this. We are useless. Not entirely. As long as we sit still enough, we make a perfectly good paperweight. But for the needs of this story, we are useless. Well, that's a fine way to begin, you may think. You may think you are useless, but don't dare assume you can speak for me, which is a fair response. So let me put it this way. When was the last time we had a brand new Christian walk into our church as a direct result of who and how we are as ambassadors of Christ? It's not happened while I've been here. And forgive me if my assumptions are entirely too great, but I don't think it had happened for some time before I arrived either. So, measured by that statistic, we, that is, you and I, are useless. We're entirely incompetent to complete this most basic task of continuing and growing the church. Now, before we all give up, close up and go home, I want to suggest that while what I may have just said is true, I think that it may miss the point. And I think that it misses the point right from the very beginning of the story. I have this gut feeling that we are stuck in our uselessness, not because we made bad decisions, although we still have to take responsibility for our actions, but because somewhere along the line in the last few hundred years, the church lost sight of how God made us. It may seem arrogant in the extreme to suggest, but bear with me for a while longer. There are two parts to this as I see it, and I want to begin at the beginning before comparing and contrasting the beginning with our now. In the beginning, God created. Let's think about that for a moment. This is the very first thing we're told about God. God created. The very essence of who God is as creator. Being as we are, the temptation is to move on from that and ask, well, what was created? But if we do that, we miss out on an incredibly important point. God is more than just the creator. God creates. In a sense, God self-defines as creator. We could quite reasonably stop in our descriptions of God, leaving off God as love, God as provider, God as comforter, God is, because God as creator encompasses all these things and more besides. Take a moment and try to think of something that does not involve the act of creating in some way. Even destruction requires creation before it can take place. Without creation, there's nothing to love. Without creation, there is no provision, no comfort. Now, look at creation. In particular, the first people. Then God said, "Let us make humankind in our own image." Stop. What was that? We're made in God's image. What is God's self-image? That of creator. So we, you and I, are made to be creators. Not only that, but everything that God says and does from here on in serves to emphasize our role as creators. From naming the animals, to tilling the ground and bearing children, even the building of an ark and making alcohol. Creating is quite literally in our DNA. I would go so far as to say that our true nature is as creators. And before you start saying, but I'm not creative, let's think about what being a creator looks like. I'm going to define creator as someone who adds something good to the world. That might be physical or emotional or intellectual. It might be huge, or it could be tiny. It could be teaching someone to cook or sharing a smile in passing. A small child creates when it plays with its toys or builds mud pies in the rain. Singing, writing poetry, making, playing, walking. Even resting in the sunshine can be an act of creation as it renews and refreshes our souls and our bodies. Saying thank you, laughing out loud, weeping for lost loved ones, chatting over a cup of tea, mowing the lawn, making a meal can all be acts of creation. And in each of these acts we emulate our Creator, working out the DNA placed within us. Our second reading is from the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 2 verses 6 to 13. Yet among the mature we do speak wisdom, though it is not a wisdom of this age or of the rulers of this age who are doomed to perish. But we speak God's wisdom, secret and hidden, which God decreed before the ages for our glory. None of the rulers of this age understood this, for if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. But as it is written, what no eye has seen, nor ear heard, nor the human heart conceived, what God has prepared for those who love him. These things God has revealed to us through the Spirit, for the Spirit searches everything, even the depths of God. For what human being knows what is truly human, except the human spirit that is within? So also no one comprehends what is truly God's, except the Spirit of God. Now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit that is from God, so we may understand the gifts bestowed on us by God. And we speak of these things in words not taught by human wisdom, but taught by the Spirit, interpreting spiritual things to those who are spiritual. Somewhere along the line, we, that is human beings, lost the plot. Maybe it was at the point that man said, "She made me do it." Maybe it was later. Whatever it was, and I suspect that it's happened multiple times down through the millennia, we lost sight of our true nature as creators. Oh, the creating went on, but we either didn't understand or denied the source of our creativity. In our denial, we began to lose faith in ourselves entirely, closely followed by a loss of faith in others and in God. I find myself wondering if this is God's wisdom that Paul refers to, that secret and hidden wisdom decreed before the ages for our glory. Let me explain. In God's wisdom, we were created to be in the image of God. That image is, first and foremost, of being a creator. You and I have been created to create. But we've lost sight of what that really means. It's become secret and hidden precisely because we stopped being creative in the way God intended us to be. Instead of adding good to the world, we began tearing down and taking away. Where there once was harmony, we brought disharmony. Where there'd been conversation, we brought argument. Where there was equality, we brought disequilibrium and opprobrium. Slavery became acceptable. Patriarchy became acceptable. Supremacy, be it white or some other kind, became acceptable. Division and hatred became the norm. It's no wonder we lost sight of God's wisdom. But what are the consequences? Leaving aside the obvious, I want to suggest some consequences of failing to create that I think are overlooked. stop creating and think back to how we defined creating to begin with, we experience a disconnect between what our DNA tells us is normal and what we are doing. If we stop for too long, it begins to build up what I'm going to call bad juju. We begin to stop trusting ourselves and other people. That loss of trust combines with a lack of self-belief because we're not being who we know we really are, and we lose hope. It's no wonder that people in New Zealand and around the world are experiencing such high levels of mental health disorders and suicide. When we can no longer be who we are designed to be, we break. Imagine a painter never allowed to paint, or a builder never allowed to build, or a farmer never allowed to farm, or a chef never allowed to cook. What is going on in their hearts in that scenario? Let's dig a little deeper. The rash of farmer suicides in the 80s as interest rates forced people off their farms, as they were pushed away from the centre of their creativity, all too many just gave up. Now think about a young person forced through an unbending schooling system to do what everyone else does, when all they want to do is dance or run or make things. Even the best teacher in the world is not enough if you have shut down a child's passion to create in their own way. Is it any wonder that our youth are killing themselves in unprecedented numbers? So, what to do? First, we need to acknowledge that the church is no better at this than the rest of the world, because we aren't. We are just as good, if not better, at shutting down people's creativity as anyone else. Let's own that. Let's own our lack of creativity and the freedom to create. It's not comfortable, it's not easy, but we can do it. Then we look God in the eye and we ask, what now? How can we be creative in a way that reflects the DNA God has placed in us? Let me suggest some homework for this week. Every day this week, look for a way that you can be deliberately creative. Plan something for every day. It might be 10 minutes in the garden one day. It might be smiling at a stranger another day. Perhaps making something small or large. Calling someone on the phone. Singing a song. Going for a walk. Encouraging a child in their learning. Whatever it is that floats your boat. And when we get to church next week, we can share with each other what we've created. We pray. God, who is constantly creating, making, teaching, learning, you have given us your DNA of creativity. Teach us to break out that creativity in all we are, in every aspect of our lives. Gift us courage to be creators in the way you've designed us to be. And as we make our timid steps into this incredible place of being like you, help us to bring others with us. We want to see you glorified in all that we do, revealed in our actions, in our creating. And Jesus, who created with a word. Amen.